When we're dealing with the energy of the moon, what we're dealing with is the idea of reaction. The reason the idea of the moon represents reaction is because everything associated with lunar energy is based on an action that has already been pre-programmed or premeditated within us, although we may not be consciously thinking about it. In other words, when certain things happen to us or when we're faced against certain situations, how we react is based upon what we have been programmed with. Now, if we ask ourselves, what have we been programmed with, during our childhood, during our early lifetime? Is any of these things actually set in stone? What do I mean by this? Most of the time when we think about the idea of the moon, we think about the past. We think about what has happened. We think about nostalgia, those good times, not so much the bad times, sometimes the bad times, etc., etc. What this means is we are not sucked into or limited to the things that actually happen to us. What I mean by this is, regardless of the type of situation we may have came into when we entered into our vessel, we're not limited to what we could do, what we couldn't do, what type of upbringing we had, what we didn't have, what we did have. Now, we can think about those things, but we are not limited to those things, because if you go back in your past and rearrange the course of events, which most people don't think about doing, they just look at it as whatever has happened has happened. But we are able to go back in time and rearrange the course of events to our liking. So when we think about the past, we're not thinking about the things that we didn't want to happen. We rearrange the past in a way that whenever we focus upon the past, it doesn't drain our energy. It actually gives us a new spark of life, which leads into the definition of the moon. When we break down the letters of the moon, we get the number 3, which is the energy of expansion. Expansion of what? Expansion of how we choose to react, depending on what situation we are faced. In other words, we don't have to limit ourselves to what we have been programmed to think we have to react in whatever fashion. We don't have to, A plus B equals C. We don't have to have this linear way of thinking. We can expand beyond the things we have been programmed with and replace them with new ideas, new ways of thought, new methods, techniques, and practices that expand beyond whatever our past may have been. So the reason the energy of the moon breaks down to the number 3, which represents expansion, is once we expand the way we react to everything that happens around us and everything that happens within us, we are able to see a lot further. This is getting into the practices of lucid dreaming and things like this. Most of the time when we dream, it's either we don't remember our dreams or we're kind of being pulled by a stronger force. This pull, again, is just a lack of expansion because we're just going along with how we have been programmed. So when we actually tap into our dreams, the only thing we're really able to perceive is just the things that have had happened, things that has happened, things that we think may happen in the future. We're just limited to this bubble of this is who I am, this is what I've been through, and this is where I'm going with my life. When we expand beyond that, we start to go deeper into the abyss. Let's take it a step further. Now, if we break it down, using the supreme mathematics, what do we end up with? M is the 13th letter. O is the 15th letter. So you got two 15s. And N is the 14th letter. What do you end up with? 4, 6, 6, 5. Which represents what? 4 represents culture. 6 represents equality. And we have that 2 times, so we're just going to put x2. And of course, 5 represents power. Now, what is all this talking about? Remember, as we know, moon breaks down to 3, which represents expansion. What are we expanding? We are expanding the way we react to all events and happenings in life, which builds one's culture. Based on how you react to everything that comes at you will shape and mold the foundation of your culture, which will either lead to equality or inequality, depending on how you react to the things and situations we are faced with every day, whether in the waking life, the dream world, or the spiritual world. Based on how we react, whether that reaction is rooted in fear or that reaction is rooted in courage, that will determine our culture, which again will either lead to an equality or an inequality within ourselves. And once we start to manage that equality properly, we begin to empower ourselves because we can change the way we react to everything that happens around us, which gives us a newborn power that we didn't notice we had before. Now let's look at this from the aspect of supreme mathematics as well as supreme alphabet. Now, when we take it to the supreme alphabet, we have M, which represents master. We have O, which represents cipher. Again, 2 times. And we have N, which of course represents now or end. Now, what is this talking about? What are you mastering within the cipher? We understand that the cipher within is what we like to call the mind. Not to say that the mind is inside the body, but the mind is within us in terms of we can't perceive it outside of ourselves, in the sense of when we think about the mind, we think about inside our head, even though we know that the mind is more expansive and it can go beyond our physical limitations. For the most part, we just think about that from a physical level. So what are we the master of? What are we hoping to achieve mastery of when we think about what's going on within us on an unseen level, on a quantum level? And when we go two layers deep within the spirit realm, you can say this represents the dream consciousness. So this isn't just going into the subconscious mind. This is also having consciousness while in your subconscious mind. There is some type of bridge or communication that is built between the conscious mind and the subconscious mind. This is what makes a master. A master, again, is the 13th letter. 1 represents knowledge. 3 represents understanding. A master has knowledge and understanding of his culture. 1 + 3 = 4. And what is his culture? His culture can be found not only on the outside as well as the inside. So the culture, he builds his culture around him. He surrounds himself within his culture, which is a reflection of his internal thought processes as well as how he reacts or how she reacts, her emotional responses shape and mold her culture. Going into the last aspect, now or end, we understand because our reactions and our emotional responses shape and mold our way of life. We understand that our way of life is something that has to be practiced in the moment. This is why we can't put too much energy into the past or the future without staying in the present. Because if we project our mind into the past or the future without having a strong foundation in the now, where we will end up is somewhere where we cannot be found. So that's just a simplified version of understanding the energy of the moon from an esoteric level. We out.